Triggered. What does that word mean, and why does everyone use it all the time? We hear it in the therapeutic and healing worlds. It means something is up for me that maybe doesn't match the situation in the present. Something old, something historic is being triggered by the moment. And I bring this up because I help parents to learn to regulate themselves and track their triggers. So let's talk about it. I'm Rathia Lee. I make videos about non-coercive collaborative parenting. I help parents transition from a punishment-based way of parenting to something more collaborative and self-responsible. Here's an example of a trigger. They happen constantly in everyone's lives. We are all triggered all the time. Honestly, we are, unless we had like an absolutely perfect childhood, which nobody had. Let's say you're talking to a friend, you had a plan, you were going to get together, and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it, I'm going to have to reschedule. And you get triggered, right? So something gets triggered, you have maybe rejection issues from your childhood, really good reasons why rejection gets hit for you. You're in a moment, they said something innocent and understandable, but now you are triggered into your stuff. You have feelings, you feel bad about yourself, you feel pushed away, you want to get mad, you want to react, you want to withdraw. You're triggered. Your school is in session, as they say. And this is what happens with our kids rather constantly. And it's worse with our kids than anyone else, and I'll tell you why. No one will trigger us as deeply and as intensely as our children usually, because we attach to our children in a way that is like unlike anyone else in our lives. We make ourselves vulnerable, we gut ourselves, we open our hearts, and we attach to our children, and we give all that we can, all that we have, many of us. But we've never done that before until we had kids. So now we attach to our kids. Our heart is on the line. We are engaged at a level we never have before, and our children are not doing what we expect them to do, or they're acting in ways that we think are wrong. We get triggered. We get triggered. And what does that mean? We are catapulted into feelings and belief systems from our past. Let me give you an example. You're trying to get out of the house. Your kid is stalling, taking forever, running around, won't get their shoes on, won't put their coat on, going upstairs. My kid used to lock herself in her room when it was time to leave. I mean, things like that, where you are rendered powerless, like you were when you were young. You feel powerless. You can't get what you want. You can't get what you're supposed to get from the kid. Suddenly you're triggered. You're triggered into something old. When my daughter used to lock herself in the room, I would feel panic, and then I would get angry. This is what happens. The parents everywhere, we feel helpless and we get angry, right? So in my family, with my daughter, she has learned that when I get triggered, it's not about her. I've taught her this, and we have a culture in our family where she's allowed to say, Mom, are you triggered right now? And I'll go, yes, I am. So like I'll guilt trip her. I'll be like, why can't you blah, 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 blah. I always do that for you. Why can't you do it for me? And she'll go, Mom, are you guilt tripping me? Are you triggered? And I'll be like, yes, I am. Because I've taught her to recognize my issues so that she doesn't take them on. Because unfortunately, that's what children do. They take on their parents' triggers and they feel responsible for them. And that creates a lot of wounding and a lot of pain. So I want to help you track your triggers. The very first step in tracking your triggers is pausing. Pausing, P-A-U-S, not pause, but pausing. When something happens and you feel your nervous system get activated, you feel a lot of sudden emotion, you feel fear, you feel anger, you feel shame, that is the moment when you want to pause. My camera is shaking in the wind. Hold on. I'm getting triggered by my camera shaking in the wind. I feel helpless over my camera shaking in the wind, and I'm getting triggered. This is perfect. It's an in-the-moment example. And this, I'm not even that attached to my camera. Imagine if I was really attached to my camera, how triggered I might get. Okay, something happens. The first thing you do is you notice you're having a reaction. You want to pause. And you want to have the intention to take responsibility for your own feelings and not blame your child. That is like something most people cannot even begin to imagine. Blaming is part of our culture, it's part of our society, and especially blaming children. Why do they make us feel all these things? They make us so angry. They make us so scared. They make us feel so embarrassed, all of those things. So we want to stop the blame and just own it. Own that we're having a reaction. That is step one. Step two is self-inquiry and really asking the question, what is this hitting for me? What is the story I'm telling myself? And usually it's that your child is wrong. They shouldn't talk that way. They shouldn't look that way. They shouldn't take so long. They shouldn't push back. They shouldn't yell. They shouldn't cry. They shouldn't have big feelings. They should do what you say. They should do it in a timely manner. All the shoulds and shouldn'ts. The story will come up. And it's a chance for you to look at the story. Now, I know it's really hard to do in the moment. So usually, often, all you can do is wait and pause and be present. It's a whole skill set to actually inquire about where the trigger comes from. With parents, you can almost be 100% sure that the trigger is from how you were treated. How were you treated when you took too long to get out of the house, when you didn't put your shoes on, when you spoke back, when you resisted, when you didn't sit at the table? What happened to you? And you can be sure that whatever happened to you is getting triggered in that moment by your child, right? The feelings that you never got to have in those moments will arise. And what's really sad and kind of remarkable is often we play our parents' role with our kids. We were shut up, right? Like we were yelled at or shut up or criticized, and we feel so compelled to do it again with our kids. The voice of our parents, our caregivers, our adults, our teachers, the people that were judgmental and controlling, their voices arise and try to squash our child and squash our own feelings. So part of it is becoming aware of your own wounding. The very foundation of being a loving parent is owning our own wounds from the past. It's incredibly hard to do. I've been in therapy on and off for like 30 years, and I still find it very, very difficult because the trigger is hot. It's radioactive, and I am sure that my child is causing it. And so I've had to learn through years. I mean, she's only 12, but I've had to work very, very hard until she was born. And now, as she's been alive, to not just enact my triggers. Here's an example. My daughter goes to school, and when I pick her up from the bus stop, oftentimes she doesn't want to talk yet. She's overstimulated. She's had a day of being told what to do. She gets in the car, and she just wants to be quiet for a little bit, which is absolutely reasonable. And it triggers me. Because I feel rejected. I've missed her all day. I want to hear what's going on. And I'm learning to sit with my triggers and track it back to what it reminds me of. And guess what it reminds me of? It reminds me of my relationship with my mother, where she was emotionally unavailable and she often pushed me away. She just didn't want to talk to me. She didn't want to engage with me. And it triggers that historic feeling of I can't connect with the person I love. I'm being rejected. It's a rejection trigger. This is just one moment of my daughter triggering me. There's 1,000 million of them. It is when we just respond from our parents' internalized voice that we start reenacting traumas and emotional abuse and all kinds of abuse, right? That's how generational pain gets passed down, is through having no way to work with our triggers and not being willing to. What's so exciting to me is I'm running these parent support groups, and I'm just attracting all these parents who are like ready to take responsibility. It is so beautiful, and I love it so much, and it makes my heart swell. What it does is, as parents own their process, is it gives them room to see their child for who they are and to start to make a relationship that is much more respectful. When we're blaming our kids, there's just such a block to closeness because they become our victimizer, right? We feel like victims to our children. That's what those triggers are saying in our mind, is that we are a victim to our child, making us feel this way. And how could they, and how dare they? And then we need to get them to stop and act different so we don't have to feel this way. And we have all the power. Parents have all the power. so we can do whatever we want to get them to stop making us be triggered. And usually that's the unconscious objective, is to make our child stop making us remember things we don't want to remember. I'm like a broken record. I say this in all my videos because it's so incredibly difficult for parents to understand that it's not their child's fault what they feel. And actually, it's empowering to own it. It's empowering to be self-responsible. It's like the keys to the queendom. And so, even sometimes with my daughter, I can't control how triggered I am, but I can at least say I'm triggered. And that opens up a space for her to just take care of herself and not take it on. Sometimes she'll want to know, like, what is it triggering for you? And I'll be like, my mom, it's hitting my mom stuff. I don't unload on my daughter. I don't like tell her my problems, but I'll just give her some idea of what's going on for me, and then she can identify it, like, oh, that's what it's hitting in my mom, and it doesn't have to do with me. And she'll ask me questions about it, and it's just an opening for us to be closer. And it's getting to the point where she's starting to be able to recognize when she's triggered. Even though she's only 12, she still has triggers, because like she went through a divorce and she's had peer conflicts and life is hard, and she gets triggered also. And now she can say, I'm triggered into my stuff, or I'm triggered into some big feelings, and then we can work with it together. So you can't really collaborate with your child if you're blaming your child. You can't find common ground. You can't communicate effectively. You can't express your feelings or hear their feelings. There can't be a clear exchange of energy and love as long as you're blaming. And trigger is another way of saying blaming. It's a pathway into blaming. I'm triggered and now I'm blaming. You can start by pausing when you're reactive, and you can start journaling. Like whenever you're triggered, you can start journaling. And if you want to know what to do once you're not triggered, or even while you're triggered, I would watch my videos about collaboration. I talk about collaboration. I have a podcast where we get into the nitty-gritty about collaboration, what it looks like with all different age children. What does it mean to collaborate with children? To negotiate for everyone to get their needs met, for everyone to have a voice. It's so radical, unfortunately, in this world, to treat children like full, whole people, and not little objects that need to be moved around and forced to behave and be obedient. That is exactly the opposite of my message. Thanks for listening. I hope this was helpful. I'm here for you.
She's my wild storm child, and